The first rope snapped at sunrise. Caleb Thornton's hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped his knife. Blood dripped from his palms where the rough hemp had cut into his skin, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not when 6 more women still hung from those posts, their bodies swaying in the cold Arizona wind like broken prayers. "Hold on," he whispered to the unconscious woman in his arms. "Don't you dare die on me. Not today." He had come to this land to forget death. Instead, death had found him again. Dude, if you want to know what happens next, subscribe to my channel and follow this story until the very end. Drop a comment below telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this tale has traveled. Copper Valley, Arizona Territory. October 1879. The fever had taken everything from Caleb Thornton. His wife Margaret first. Then his daughter Lily, just 6 years old, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. He had held them both as they slipped away, one after the other, in that small farmhouse in Missouri, where he thought they would grow old together. That was 2 years ago. 2 years of whiskey and silence, and a grief so heavy it bent his spine. Now he was here in a territory he didn't know, on land he had bought with the last of his savings, trying to outrun ghosts that followed him everywhere. "Ain't running no more," he muttered to his horse as they crested the final ridge. "This is where we start over, boy. This is where—" He stopped. His heart stopped. There in the valley below, 7 wooden posts stood against the pale morning sky, and from each post hung a body. "No." The word came out like a prayer. "No, no, no." Caleb kicked his horse forward, his mind screaming that he was too late, that death had beaten him here too, that this cursed land was just another grave waiting to swallow him whole. But as he got closer, one of the bodies moved. A hand, reaching up, fingers clawing at the rope around her neck. "They're alive!" Caleb leapt from his saddle before his horse had fully stopped. His boots hit the ground hard, and he was running, pulling his knife from his belt, his lungs burning with desperate hope. The first woman hung from the nearest post. Young, maybe 25. Her face was swollen, her lips cracked and bleeding, but her chest still rose and fell in shallow gasps. "I've got you!" Caleb climbed the rickety wooden frame, his knife slashing through the rope. "I've got you, miss. Just hold on." She fell into his arms like a rag doll, weighing almost nothing. He laid her gently on the ground and moved to the next post. The second woman was older, 40 maybe. Her eyes fluttered open as he cut her down, and she looked at him with such confusion, such terror, that it broke something inside him. "You're safe now," he told her, though he didn't know if it was true. "I ain't gonna hurt you." The third, the fourth, the fifth, each one more broken than the last. Bruises around their wrists where they had been bound. Welts across their backs from whips. And those rope burns around their necks, angry and red, marking them as women who had been sentenced to die. The sixth woman wasn't breathing. Caleb pressed his ear to her chest, his hands trembling. Nothing. He tilted her head back, breathed air into her lungs, pressed down on her chest, the way an army surgeon had taught him during the war. "Come on," he growled. "Come on, damn it, don't you give up." 1 breath, 2, 3. She coughed, sputtered, drew in air like a drowning woman breaking the surface. "That's it," Caleb's voice cracked. "That's it. Stay with me." The 7th woman was different from the others. She hung from the tallest post, her long black hair covering her face. But even half dead, even with her body broken and her spirit battered, there was something about her that made Caleb pause. Strength. Even now there was strength in the way she held herself, in the set of her jaw, in the fingers that still gripped the rope, still fighting, still refusing to surrender. He climbed up to cut her down, and her eyes opened. Dark eyes, deep as the desert night, filled with pain and fury and something else, something that looked almost like hope. "You came," she whispered, her voice raw and ruined. "I came," Caleb said. "Now let me get you down from there." "They will kill you for this." "They can try." The knife sliced through the rope. She fell into his arms, and for a moment, just a moment, she let herself be held. Let herself be weak. Let someone else carry the weight. Then her eyes hardened again. "My sisters," she said. "The others. Are they alive? All of them. Barely, but alive." She closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her bruised cheek. "Then we have not lost yet." Getting them to his ranch took everything Caleb had. He loaded them into his wagon one by one, laying them on the blankets he had brought for his new home. Some were unconscious. Others drifted in and out, moaning softly with each bump in the road. The seventh woman, the one with the dark eyes, stayed awake the whole time, watching him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "You got a name?" he asked as the wagon rolled across the dusty terrain. "Morning Star." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "My people call me Star." "I'm Caleb. Caleb Thornton." "Why did you help us, Caleb Thornton?" He didn't answer for a long moment. The question sat heavy in his chest, mixing with memories he had tried so hard to bury. "Because I couldn't save my own family," he finally said. "And I'll be damned if I watch anyone else die when I could have done something." Star studied him, really studied him, like she was looking past his skin and bone and seeing something underneath. "You carry death with you," she said quietly. "I can see it in your eyes." "We all carry something, ma'am." "Yes." She touched the rope burn on her neck. "We do." The ranch was small, just a cabin, a barn, and a few acres of land that stretched toward the mountains. But it had a well with clean water and walls that kept out the wind, and right now, that was enough. Caleb worked through the night. He boiled water and tore his shirts into bandages. He cleaned wounds and applied salve and forced water between cracked lips. He held a young woman's hand while she screamed through a nightmare, and he talked an older woman down from a panic so deep she had forgotten how to breathe. By dawn, all 7 were stable, sleeping, healing. And Caleb sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees, watching the horizon for whoever might come looking for them. "You have not slept." He turned to find Star standing in the doorway. She was wrapped in one of his blankets, her face still swollen, but her eyes clear and alert. "Neither have you," he said. "I have slept enough." She stepped onto the porch and sat down beside him, moving carefully, wincing with each motion. 2 days we hung there, 2 days in the sun, with no water, waiting to die. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Who did this to you?" "The men who want our land." Star looked out at the valley, at the mountains rising purple in the distance. "This valley, Copper Valley, it has belonged to my people for generations, long before your government drew lines on maps and called it territory. We had a treaty, signed papers, promises from men in suits who came from Washington and said our land would be protected forever. Let me guess, forever didn't last long." "No." A bitter smile crossed her face. "Forever lasted until they found copper in the mountains. Until the railroad wanted to build through our hunting grounds. Until our lives became worth less than the metal in the dirt." Caleb had seen it before. In Missouri, in Kansas, in every place where land held something valuable and people stood in the way. "They forged new papers," Star continued. "Said our treaty was void. Said we had abandoned the land and had no right to return. When we refused to leave, they burned our village, killed our men, took our children to the reservation in San Carlos." Her voice broke. "And they hung us, the women who dared to resist, as a warning to anyone who might try to fight back." "The sheriff?" "The law." Star laughed. It was the saddest sound Caleb had ever heard. "The sheriff is paid by Silas Hartwell. The judge is his cousin. The newspaper prints whatever lies he tells them. She turned to look at Caleb, and in her eyes he saw not just grief, but fury, cold and sharp and burning. "There is no law for people like us, Caleb Thornton. There is only power, and Hartwell has all of it." Hartwell. Caleb rolled the name around in his mouth like something bitter. "That's the man behind this. Silas Hartwell. He owns the Frontier Land and Trust Company, the copper mines, half the businesses in town." Star pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "He is not like the other ranchers, the ones who hate us because we are different. Hartwell does not hate. He simply does not see us as human. We are obstacles, problems to be solved, weeds to be pulled so his garden can grow." And the women inside, they were all part of this resistance. "My sisters, my family. Not all by blood, but all by bond." Star nodded toward the cabin. "Willow is our healer. She has saved more lives than any doctor in the territory. River is my blood sister, young and foolish sometimes, but brave. Red Feather has a son, 4 years old, hidden with families who support us. She fights so she can see him again." Her voice softened. "Painted Sky lost her husband to Hartwell's men 3 years ago. Sparrow is our eldest. She keeps the songs, the stories, the memories of who we were before all this. And Dawn Walker, the one with the scar." "Yes." Star's eyes grew distant. "She got that scar defending a child from one of Hartwell's foremen. Cut him down before he could do his worst. They beat her half to death for it, but she survived. She always survives." Caleb looked back at the cabin, at the 7 women sleeping inside, each carrying wounds far deeper than the ones he could see. "So what happens now?" he asked. "You heal up, and then what, go back to fighting a war you can't win?" Star turned to face him fully. In the pale morning light, even bruised and battered, she was striking. Not beautiful in the way Eastern magazines painted beauty, soft and delicate and ornamental. She was beautiful like a thunderstorm, like a wildfire, like something that could not be tamed or owned or broken. "Can't win," she repeated. "Is that what you think? I think Hartwell has money men and the law on his side. I think you have 7 injured women and no place to run." 8. "What? 8? Star held his gaze. "We have 8 now, if you are willing." Caleb shook his head slowly. "Ma'am, I came here to build a ranch, to raise cattle, to live out whatever years I have left in peace. I didn't come here looking for a fight. No one ever does." Star rose to her feet, grimacing at the pain. "But sometimes the fight finds you anyway. Sometimes you have to choose peace bought with silence, or truth that costs everything." She walked back toward the door, then paused. "You asked me why we have not lost yet. Why I said those words when you cut me down." She looked back at him over her shoulder. "It is because of an old prophecy my grandmother told me when I was a child. She said that in our darkest hour, a stranger with grief in his heart would come to us. A man who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. And together, only together, we would find a way to make the powerful tremble." Caleb felt something cold run down his spine. "That's just a story." "Perhaps." Star's lips curved into a faint smile. "But you are here, are you not, a stranger, with grief in your heart, on the very day we were meant to die?" She disappeared into the cabin, leaving Caleb alone with the sunrise and questions he didn't know how to answer. 3 days passed. The women healed faster than Caleb expected. Willow the healer turned his kitchen into a medicine lodge, brewing teas from plants she gathered in the hills and mixing poultices that smelled like sage and honey. Dawn Walker was walking by the second morning, testing her strength against the barn wall, pushing herself past pain that would have broken a weaker person. Red Feather cried in her sleep every night, calling out a name, "Tommy, Tommy, Mama's coming." And every night Caleb pretended not to hear. Sparrow hummed old songs while she worked her voice thin and reedy, but somehow beautiful. River followed Caleb around like a shadow, asking questions about his horse, his rifle, his past. "You were a soldier," she said on the third morning, watching him chop wood. "I can tell by the way you move." "Captain? Union Army, long time ago." "Did you kill people?" "River." Star appeared at the cabin door, her tone sharp. "That is not a question you ask." "It's all right." Caleb set down the axe. "Yeah, I killed people. More than I can count. Thought it was righteous at the time. Now," he shook his head, "now I just try not to think about it too much." River tilted her head, studying him. "Do you regret it?" "Some of it. Not all." He picked up the axe again. "War's complicated, miss. You do things you never thought you could do. And then you spend the rest of your life figuring out how to live with yourself." "That is why you came here," Star said quietly. She had walked closer without him noticing. "To figure out how to live with yourself." "Something like that." "And have you figured it out?" Caleb looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time since that morning on the porch. "I thought I had," he said slowly. "Thought if I just got far enough away from everything, from everyone, the ghosts would stop following me. But," he glanced back at the cabin, "now I've got 7 Apache women sleeping in my house, a land baron who wants me dead, and a prophecy I don't believe in telling me I'm supposed to be some kind of hero." "You do not have to be a hero," Star said. "You just have to be a man who refuses to look away." Before Caleb could respond, the sound of hoofbeats echoed across the valley. River's head snapped up. "Someone's coming." "Get inside." Caleb grabbed his rifle. "All of you, now." Star didn't move. "I am not hiding." "This ain't about hiding. It's about not getting shot before we know who we're dealing with." Their eyes locked. For a moment, Caleb thought she would argue. Then she nodded once shortly and ushered River into the cabin. Caleb walked to the edge of his property and waited. There were 5 of them. 4 hired guns in dusty coats, their hands hovering near their holsters, and 1 man in front mounted on a pure white horse that probably cost more than Caleb's entire ranch. He was older, maybe 55, silver hair swept back from a tanned face and cold blue eyes that looked at Caleb like he was measuring him for a coffin. "Good morning," the man said pleasantly. "You must be the new owner of this land. And you must be Silas Hartwell." Something flickered in Hartwell's eyes. Surprise maybe, or annoyance. "My reputation precedes me." "So does your handiwork." Caleb nodded toward the valley. "I saw the posts, the ropes, real civilized work stringing up women like scarecrows." Hartwell's smile didn't waver. "A terrible misunderstanding. Those women were criminals, trespassers on company land, saboteurs who destroyed property and threatened our workers. The local authorities dealt with them according to the law." "Is that what you call it, the law?" "I call it progress, Mr." Hartwell waited. "Thornton. Caleb Thornton." "Mr. Thornton." Hartwell leaned forward in his saddle. "Let me be direct with you. I'm a businessman. I don't enjoy unpleasantness. I simply want what is best for this territory, prosperity, growth, civilization. The Apache had their time here. That time is over. Fighting against that truth only brings suffering." "Funny." Caleb shifted his rifle, making sure Hartwell's men saw it. "I've heard that same speech before. Different people, different places, but always the same words. Progress, civilization, best for everyone. And somehow the people saying it are always the ones getting rich while everyone else bleeds." Hartwell's smile finally faltered. "I came here as a courtesy," he said, his voice cooling. "To welcome you to Copper Valley, and to explain how things work. The women you are harboring, if you are harboring them, are fugitives from justice. Returning them to the proper authorities would be the wisest course of action, for your sake and theirs." "And if I don't?" Hartwell studied him for a long moment. Then he straightened in his saddle and turned his horse around. I believe in giving people chances, Mr. Thornton. Second chances, even. You seem like a reasonable man. A former soldier, if I'm not mistaken. You know how the world works. He glanced back over his shoulder. You have 3 days to consider your options. After that, well, I'm afraid I'll have to assume you've chosen to be unreasonable. He rode away. His men followed, their eyes lingering on Caleb with the promise of violence. Only when the hoofbeats had faded into silence did Star emerge from the cabin. 3 days, she said. 3 days. What will you do? Caleb looked at her, at the women gathering behind her in the doorway, at the faces that had already survived so much and were preparing to survive more. He thought about Margaret, about Lily, about all the people he couldn't save, and all the nights he had spent wondering why he was still alive when they weren't. And suddenly, impossibly, he knew. I'm going to do something I should have done a long time ago, Caleb said quietly. I'm going to stop running from a fight. Star's eyes widened, just slightly, just enough to show that despite everything she hadn't fully expected this. You understand what that means? Hartwell will come for you. He will burn this ranch. He will... I know what he'll do. Caleb turned to face all of them, the 7 women who had been left to die and somehow survived. But I also know what I'll do if I walk away. I'll spend the rest of my life wondering, hating myself. And I've done enough of that already. He stepped forward close enough that he could see the tears Star was fighting to hold back. You said your grandmother had a prophecy, a stranger with grief in his heart, a man who had nothing left to fear. He held out his hand. I don't know about prophecies. I don't know if I'm the man you've been waiting for, but I know I'm done being afraid, and I know I don't want to be alone anymore. Star looked at his hand, then at his face, then at the women behind her who were watching with something that might have been hope. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out and took his hand. Then we stand together, she said. All of us. And whatever comes next, we face it as one. Caleb nodded. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled across the mountains. A storm was coming. But for the first time in 2 years, Caleb Thornton wasn't afraid of it. The first night after Hartwell's visit, nobody slept. Caleb sat at the kitchen table with a map spread out before him, marking every location he could remember from his ride into town. The women gathered around him, some standing, some sitting on the floor, all of them watching, with eyes that had seen too much to trust easily. The sheriff's office is here, Caleb said, tapping the paper. Hartwell's main office is 2 blocks east. The Land Records building is next to the courthouse, and the newspaper Arizona Chronicle sits on the corner of Main and First. The newspaper is useless, Dawn Walker said flatly. She stood in the corner with her arms crossed, the scar across her face catching the lantern light. They print whatever Hartwell tells them. Last year they called us savage squatters who threatened decent Christian folk. Then we find another way to get the truth out. Caleb looked up at Star. You said there was a treaty. Original documents. Where are they now? The official copy was sent to Washington years ago, but my father kept a duplicate. Star's voice grew quiet. It was in our village, the village they burned. Gone then? No. River stepped forward, her young face fierce with determination. I hid it. Before the soldiers came, I hid it in the old cave near the river where we used to play as children. They never found it. Caleb felt something shift in the room. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of it. Can you get to it? I can try, but the cave is on land. Hartwell's men patrol now. If they catch me, they won't catch you. Painted Sky moved to stand beside River. She was tall and lean with the bearing of a woman who had once ridden alongside warriors. I will go with her. We know that land better than any of Hartwell's hired guns. It's too dangerous, Star said. If something happens to you, something has already happened to us. Painted Sky's voice was calm but firm. We were hung from posts and left to die. There is nothing more they can do to us that they have not already tried." Star opened her mouth to argue, but Willow raised her hand. The healer rarely spoke, but when she did, everyone listened. "The child is right," Willow said, nodding toward River. "And Painted Sky is right too. We cannot win this fight by hiding. We must take risks. We must move." Then it settled. Caleb folded the map. "River and Painted Sky will retrieve the treaty, but we need more than one piece of paper. We need witnesses, testimonies, proof of what Hartwell has done that even his bought judges can't ignore." "There are settlers who know the truth," Sparrow said softly. The eldest of them, all her white hair braided down her back, she had been silent until now. "Families who came here seeking land and found only Hartwell's boot on their necks. They are afraid to speak, but they know. Then we give them a reason to stop being afraid." Caleb pushed back from the table. "Hartwell gave us 3 days. We're going to use every hour." Dawn Walker uncrossed her arms. For the first time since Caleb had met her, something like respect flickered in her eyes. "You really mean to do this," she said. "Fight a man who owns half the territory. Risk everything for people you don't even know." "I know enough." Caleb met her gaze. "I know what it feels like to lose everything. And I know what it feels like to do nothing while evil men take whatever they want." He looked around the room at each of them, these 7 women who had been condemned to die and refused to stay dead. "I spent 2 years running from my past. I'm done running. If I'm going to die, I'd rather die standing up than live on my knees." The room fell silent. Then Red Feather, who had barely spoken since the rescue, stepped forward. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "My son is out there," she said. 4 years old, hiding with a family who could be killed for protecting him. Every day I am here, every day I am not with him. I wonder if today is the day they find him." She looked at Caleb with an intensity that made his chest tight. "If you can help me get him back, if you can help us end this, I will follow you into hell itself." "We all will," Star said quietly. Caleb nodded slowly. He had led men into battle before, watched them die for causes they believed in. But this was different. This wasn't about territory or politics or the orders of distant generals. This was about something simpler and more powerful. This was about survival, about justice, about the right to exist. "Then let's get to work," he said. "We've got 3 days to change everything." The next morning, River and Painted Sky rode out before dawn. Caleb watched them go from the porch, his rifle resting against the railing. Star stood beside him, her arms wrapped around herself against the morning chill. "You're worried about them," Caleb said. "River is my blood, the only family I have left." Star's jaw tightened. "Our mother died giving birth to her. Our father raised us alone until Hartwell's men killed him 2 years ago. If I lose her too, you won't. You cannot promise that." "No." Caleb turned to face her. "But I can promise that whatever happens, she won't face it alone. None of you will. Not anymore." Star studied him for a long moment. In the pale light, with her bruises fading and her strength returning, she looked less like a survivor and more like the leader she was meant to be. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "Truly. And do not tell me again about your family. I want to know the real reason." Caleb was quiet for a long time. The question cut deeper than he expected, touching wounds he had kept hidden even from himself. "When my wife died," he finally said, "I held her hand and told her everything would be all right. I lied. I knew she was dying, and I lied to her face because I was too much of a coward to tell her the truth." He swallowed hard. "And when my daughter got sick, when I saw the fever taking her the same way it took her mother, I didn't lie to her. I told her I would save her. I told her I would find a doctor, find medicine, find some way to keep her alive." His voice broke. "I couldn't save her. I tried everything, rode 50 miles through a storm to find a doctor, spent every cent I had on medicine that didn't work. And in the end, I held her in my arms and watched her slip away, just like her mother. He wiped his eyes roughly. That's why I came here. Not to start over. To disappear. To find a place where nobody knew me and I could just stop. Stop trying. Stop failing. Stop watching people I care about die while I stand there helpless. Star reached out and touched his arm. Her fingers were warm against his skin. But then you found us, she said softly. Yeah, Caleb laughed bitterly. Then I found 7 women hanging from posts on land I thought would be my grave, and something in me just snapped. I couldn't watch it happen again. Couldn't stand there and do nothing while death took more people who deserved to live. So you saved us. I cut some ropes. That ain't saving anyone. Saving comes later. He looked out at the horizon, at the mountains rising purple in the distance. Saving means giving you a chance to live. Really live. Not just survive. And that means taking down Hartwell and everyone who helps him. Star was silent for a moment. Then she squeezed his arm gently. My grandmother's prophecy, she said. A stranger with grief in his heart. A man who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. She smiled slightly. She also said something else, something I did not tell you before. What? She said that the stranger would find more than justice in our valley. He would find a reason to live again. Star's dark eyes held his. I did not believe her. I thought it was just a story old women tell to make children hope for better days. But now I am not so sure. Before Caleb could respond, a shout came from inside the cabin. Don Walker's voice, sharp and urgent. Riders coming from the east. Caleb grabbed his rifle and ran. There were 3 of them this time. Not Hartwell. These men were rougher, meaner, with the look of hired guns who did dirty work for dirty pay. That's Burke, Willow said quietly, standing just inside the cabin door. He leads Hartwell's enforcement squad, the ones who burned our village. Caleb's grip tightened on his rifle. Stay inside, all of you. I'm not hiding, Don Walker said, stepping onto the porch with a pistol in her hand. Neither am I. Star appeared beside her holding an old hunting rifle that must have belonged to Caleb's predecessor. Damn it, both of you. We fought these men before you ever came to this valley, Star said firmly. We will fight them again, together or not at all. There was no time to argue. The riders had reached the edge of Caleb's property. Burke was a big man with a thick beard and small, cruel eyes. He smiled when he saw the women on the porch, the kind of smile that made Caleb's blood run cold. Well, well, Burke called out. Looks like the dead have risen. Hartwell's going to be real interested to hear about this. Hartwell already knows, Caleb said. He was here yesterday. Gave me 3 days to think things over. 3 days, Burke laughed. That's generous of him. Me, I ain't so patient. Then I reckon you should learn some patience. This is my land. You're not welcome on it. Burke's smile faded. Mister, I don't think you understand how things work around here. Those women are fugitives, criminals. The law says we got every right to take them back. The law. Caleb spat on the ground. You mean Hartwell's law, the kind that hangs women without a trial and calls it justice. Call it whatever you want. Makes no difference to me. Burke's hand moved toward his holster. Now you can hand them over nice and easy, or we can do this the hard way. Either way, we're leaving here with what we came for. Caleb raised his rifle and aimed it directly at Burke's chest. The hard way it is, then. For a long moment, nobody moved. The wind picked up, carrying dust across the yard. Burke's men shifted nervously in their saddles, their eyes darting between Caleb and the women. Then Burke laughed again, but there was no humor in it this time. You're making a mistake, friend. A real bad mistake. Wouldn't be my first. No, I reckon it wouldn't. Burke turned his horse slowly. 3 days, Hartwell said. Fine. You got 3 days. But when those 3 days are up, I'm coming back. And next time, I won't be so polite." He rode away. His men followed, casting dark looks over their shoulders. Caleb didn't lower his rifle until they had disappeared over the ridge. "That was stupid," Don Walker said. "Probably. He could have shot you. They all could have. But they didn't. This time." Dawn Walker holstered her pistol. "Burke isn't like Hartwell. He doesn't talk. He doesn't negotiate. He kills. And now you've made him angry." "Good." Caleb finally lowered his rifle. "Angry men make mistakes, and we're going to need every advantage we can get." The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Sparrow and Willow inventoried their supplies, food, medicine, ammunition. There wasn't much, maybe enough to last a week if they rationed carefully. Red Feather paced the cabin like a caged animal, her thoughts clearly with her son. And Star worked with Caleb on the map, identifying every possible ally, every potential weakness in Hartwell's empire. "There's a man named Malcolm Reed," Caleb said, pointing to the newspaper office. "I met him in town when I first arrived. He seemed different from the others, more honest." "The newspaper editor." Star shook her head. "He prints Hartwell's lies like everyone else. Maybe he prints them because he has to, because he's scared." Caleb tapped the map. "Fear can make people do things they hate, but it can also make them desperate for a way out. You think he would help us? I think it's worth finding out." That evening, as the sun began to set, Caleb saddled his horse. "Where are you going?" Star asked, following him to the barn. "Into town, to talk to Malcolm Reed." "That's suicide. Burke's men will be watching." "Then I'll be careful." Caleb swung into the saddle. "Someone needs to stay here and protect the others. That someone is you." "I should go with you." "No." He looked down at her, his expression softening. "You're the leader here, Star. These women follow you, not me. If something happens to me, they'll still have you. But if something happens to you—" He shook his head. "We can't risk that." Star's jaw tightened. He could see her fighting the urge to argue, to insist on coming with him. But finally she nodded. "Be careful," she said quietly. "Always am." "No, you're not. That's what worries me." Caleb smiled slightly. It was the first real smile he'd managed in days, maybe months. "I'll be back before dawn," he said. "I promise." "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I'll keep this one." He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. "Wait for me." Then he rode into the darkness. The town of Copper Valley was quiet when Caleb arrived. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that meant people were watching from behind curtained windows, waiting to see what would happen next. He tied his horse behind the general store and made his way through the back alleys toward the newspaper office. Every shadow seemed like a threat. Every creak of wood sounded like a footstep. The Arizona Chronicle was dark, but a faint light flickered in the back room. Caleb knocked softly on the rear door. Silence. He knocked again. "We're closed," came a voice from inside, nervous, afraid. "Mr. Reed, my name is Caleb Thornton. I need to talk to you." "I don't know anyone by that name. Go away." "I know about the Apache women. I know what really happened to them, and I know you know too." More silence. Then the sound of locks being undone one by one. The door cracked open, revealing a thin man in his 40s with wire-rimmed glasses and ink-stained fingers. Malcolm Reed looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Are you insane?" he hissed. "Coming here, Burke's men are everywhere." "Then let me in before they see me." Reed hesitated, then stepped aside. Caleb slipped through the door into a cramped office filled with papers, printing equipment, and the smell of old ink. "I heard what you did," Reed said, closing the door behind him. "Cutting those women down, harboring them at your ranch." He shook his head. "Hartwell is going to destroy you. Maybe, but not without a fight." Caleb turned to face him. "I need your help." "My help?" Reed laughed bitterly. I can't help anyone. I print what Hartwell tells me to print. I write what he tells me to write. If I don't, he'll ruin me. Burn my press. Maybe worse. So you're just going to keep lying for him? Keep pretending that innocent women deserve to die. Reed's face crumpled. For a moment, he looked less like a coward and more like a man carrying a weight too heavy to bear. You don't understand, he whispered. I have a family, a wife, 2 daughters. Hartwell made it very clear what would happen to them if I ever stepped out of line. And what happens to them if Hartwell wins? Caleb stepped closer. What kind of world are they going to grow up in? One where powerful men can hang women without trial and call it law. One where truth is whatever the richest man says it is. Reed was silent. I'm not asking you to be a hero, Caleb continued. I'm asking you to be a witness, to keep a record of what's really happening here. And when the time comes, when we have enough evidence to bring Hartwell down, I'm asking you to print the truth. The truth. Reed laughed again, but there was no humor in it. The truth won't matter if we're all dead. Maybe not, but at least we'll die honest. Caleb reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper, one of the documents Starr had managed to save from the burning village. This is proof that Hartwell forged land claims. Proof that the Apache treaty was legitimate. I'm going to get more. Witnesses. Testimonies. A record of every crime Hartwell has committed. He held out the paper. When I have enough, I'm sending it to the federal marshal in Tucson. A man I served with during the war. A man who can't be bought. Caleb's eyes locked with Reed's. But I need you to keep a copy here, hidden, in case something happens to me and the evidence I'm carrying. Reed stared at the paper like it was a live snake. If Hartwell finds out, he won't. Not unless you tell him. Slowly, reluctantly, Reed reached out and took the document. This is madness, he said quietly. Probably, but it's the right kind of madness. Caleb moved toward the door. I'll be in touch. Keep your head down until then. Thornton. Reed's voice stopped him. Why are you doing this? Really? Those women aren't your people. This isn't your fight. Caleb paused, his hand on the door handle. Because someone has to, he said simply. And I'm tired of being the kind of man who looks the other way. He slipped back into the night. The ride home took longer than expected. Caleb had to circle wide to avoid Burke's patrols, picking his way through canyons and dry riverbeds by starlight alone. When he finally reached the ranch, the first gray light of dawn was creeping over the mountains, and waiting for him on the porch exactly where he had left her was Starr. You came back, she said quietly. I told you I would. I didn't sleep. I thought... She stopped, shook her head. It doesn't matter what I thought. It matters to me. Starr looked at him for a long moment. Something passed between them. Something unspoken but powerful, like the charge in the air before lightning strikes. Did you find what you were looking for? She asked. I found a man who's scared enough to help us. Caleb dismounted and led his horse toward the barn. It's a start. Starr fell into step beside him. River and Painted Sky aren't back yet. I noticed. I'm trying not to worry. How's that working out? Terribly. Caleb smiled slightly. They'll be back. Painted Sky knows that land. She won't let anything happen to River. You trust her that much. You've known her 3 days. I trust you that much, and you trust her. He stopped and turned to face Starr. That's enough for me. Starr's eyes glistened. She blinked rapidly, fighting back tears she was too proud to shed. I am not used to this, she admitted. Depending on someone else. Letting someone else carry part of the weight. Neither am I. Caleb reached out and touched her hand just briefly, just enough. But maybe that's something we both need to learn. Before Star could respond, a shout came from the far side of the ranch. Don Walker's voice, but this time not urgent with warning. "They're back, River and Painted Sky, they're back." Caleb and Star ran. The two women rode into the yard, looking exhausted but triumphant. River slid from her horse and held up a leather pouch, her face split in a wide grin. "We got it," she said breathlessly. "The treaty. It was right where I left it." Star grabbed her sister and held her tight, murmuring something in Apache that Caleb couldn't understand. But he didn't need to understand the words to know what they meant. When Star finally released her, River handed the pouch to Caleb. "There's more," she said. "We found something else in the cave. Old letters, correspondence between Hartwell and government officials. My father must have hidden them there before he died." Caleb opened the pouch and pulled out the yellowed documents. His eyes scanned the words, and slowly a fierce smile spread across his face. "These are bribes," he said. "Payments to judges, promises to officials, proof that Hartwell bought his way into power." He looked up at the women gathering around him. "This is it. This is enough." "Enough for what?" Red Feather asked. "Enough to bring him down." Caleb clutched the documents to his chest. "Enough to make him pay for everything he's done." Star stepped forward, her dark eyes burning with a fire that matched his own. "Then we have 2 days left," she said. 2 days to gather witnesses, to make copies, to send everything to your marshal in Tucson." 2 days, Caleb repeated. She held out her hand. "Then let's not waste another minute." Caleb took her hand, held it, felt the strength in her grip and the hope in her eyes. 2 days to change everything. 2 days to burn down an empire of lies. 2 days before Hartwell came for them with everything he had. And somewhere deep inside, in a place he had thought was dead, forever, Caleb Thornton began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could win. The morning of the third day arrived with a sky the color of old blood. Caleb stood at the window of the cabin, watching the horizon, his rifle loaded and ready. Behind him, the women moved with quiet purpose, checking weapons, securing supplies, preparing for what they all knew was coming. "The letter went out yesterday," Star said, coming to stand beside him. "Your friend in Tucson should receive it within the week. If it gets through." Caleb's jaw was tight. Hartwell has men everywhere. He could have intercepted it. Then we sent 2 more copies. Different routes. Different messengers. Star touched his arm. "We have done everything we can. Now we wait." "I hate waiting." "So do I." A faint smile crossed her face. "But I have learned that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones where you cannot swing a sword." Caleb turned to look at her. In the pale morning light, she seemed different from the broken woman he had cut down from those ropes just days ago. Stronger, more alive. The bruises on her face were fading, replaced by a fierce determination that made his chest tight. "Whatever happens today," he said quietly, "I want you to know something." "What?" "I'm glad I found you, all of you." He paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily. "These past few days, I've felt more alive than I have in years, more like myself. The man I used to be before—" His voice caught. "Before I lost everything." Star's eyes softened. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his stubbled cheek. "You did not find us, Caleb Thornton. We found each other." She held his gaze. "And whatever happens today, I want you to know that I am glad too. Glad that if I must face this fight, I face it with you beside me." For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them hummed with something unspoken, something that had been building since that first morning when she opened her eyes and saw him cutting her down from the gallows. Then Don Walker's voice shattered the silence. "Riders coming fast from the south." Caleb grabbed his rifle and ran for the door. Star was right behind him, her own weapon in hand. They weren't just riders, they were an army. Burke led them, at least 30 men, Maybe more, all armed and mounted on horses that kicked up clouds of dust as they thundered toward the ranch. And behind them, in a black carriage pulled by 4 white horses, came Silas Hartwell himself. "He brought everyone," River whispered, her face pale. "Every gun he has." "Get inside," Caleb ordered. "All of you, defensive positions just like we planned." "I'm not hiding," Dawn Walker said, her pistol already drawn. "None of us are hiding," Painted Sky added, notching an arrow in her bow. "We fight together or we die together." Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to order them to safety, but one look at their faces told him it would be useless. These women had survived too much to back down now. "All right," he said grimly. "Then let's make them pay for every inch of this land." The riders stopped at the edge of the property. Burke urged his horse forward a few steps and cupped his hands around his mouth. "Thornton, time's up. Come on out and let's talk like civilized men." "Civilized?" Redfeather spat. "These are the men who took my son, who burned our homes, and they call themselves civilized." "Easy," Caleb murmured. He stepped off the porch, his rifle held loosely but ready. "I'm here, Burke. Say what you came to say." Burke grinned, showing yellow teeth. "Mr. Hartwell would like a word with you. Private-like." The carriage door opened, and Silas Hartwell stepped out. Even now, even surrounded by armed killers, he moved with the easy confidence of a man who believed the world belonged to him. "Mr. Thornton," Hartwell called out, his voice carrying across the distance. "I had hoped you would see reason. I truly did. But it seems you've chosen to make this difficult." "Difficult?" Caleb laughed bitterly. "You call hanging 7 women without trial difficult. You call stealing land and forging documents difficult." Hartwell's expression didn't change. "I call it progress. The march of civilization. Some people adapt. Others—" He shrugged. "Others get left behind. And you get to decide who lives and who dies. Someone has to." Hartwell stepped closer, his cold eyes fixed on Caleb. "I'm going to make you an offer, Mr. Thornton. A final offer. Hand over those women and any documents you may have acquired. Leave this territory and never return. Do that and you'll live. You have my word." "Your word?" Star's voice rang out from the porch. She stepped forward to stand beside Caleb, her head held high. "Your word is worth nothing, Hartwell. You gave your word to my father when you signed that treaty. You gave your word to every family you've destroyed. Your word is ash and lies." Hartwell's gaze shifted to her and something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, hatred, fear. "Ah, Morning Star, I should have known you'd survive." His voice hardened. "Your father was a stubborn fool, too. Look where it got him." Star's grip tightened on her rifle, but she didn't flinch. "My father died with honor. Something you will never understand. Honor doesn't build railroads. Honor doesn't extract copper from mountains. Honor doesn't make men rich." Hartwell turned back to Caleb. "Last chance, Thornton. Walk away. This isn't your fight." Caleb looked at Star, at the women gathered on the porch behind her, at the faces of people who had lost everything and still refused to surrender. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "This is exactly my fight." Hartwell sighed, as if genuinely disappointed. "Very well. Burke?" "Sir." "Burn it down. Kill anyone who resists." Burke's grin widened. "With pleasure." The first shots came fast and chaotic. Caleb shoved Star behind the water trough and opened fire, dropping 2 of Burke's men before they even cleared their holsters. Dawn Walker fired from the cabin window, her shots precise and deadly. Painted Sky's arrows flew true, taking down a rider trying to flank the barn. But there were too many of them. "Fall back!" Caleb shouted. "Into the cabin!" They retreated in stages, covering each other, trading fire with the advancing gunmen. River took a bullet to the shoulder and cried out, but Willow grabbed her and dragged her inside. Red Feather fired until her gun was empty, then picked up a fallen rifle and kept shooting. Inside the cabin, chaos reigned. Sparrow was tending to the wounded while the others fired from windows and doorways. Smoke filled the air. The smell of gunpowder burned Caleb's lungs. "They're trying to get around the back," Dawn Walker shouted. "I see them." Painted Sky fired an arrow through the rear window. A scream told them it had found its mark. Caleb reloaded and glanced at Star. Her face was set in grim determination, her hands steady as she fired shot after shot. "How many rounds you got left?" he asked. 12, maybe 15. "Make them count." A bullet shattered the window above his head, spraying glass across the floor. Caleb ducked, then rose and fired back, hitting a man trying to climb onto the porch. "We can't hold them forever," Star said, her voice tight. "There are too many. We just have to hold them long enough." "Long enough for what?" Before Caleb could answer, the front door exploded inward. Burke stood in the doorway, his massive frame filling the space. Blood ran down his face from a gash above his eye, but he was smiling. Behind him, more men poured in. "End of the line, Thornton," Burke growled. Caleb raised his rifle, but Burke was faster. A meaty fist slammed into his jaw, sending him crashing into the wall. His rifle flew from his hands and skittered across the floor. "Caleb!" Star lunged toward him, but one of Burke's men grabbed her and threw her to the ground. Everything dissolved into close-quarters combat. Dawn Walker fought like a demon, her scarred face twisted in fury as she grappled with two men at once. Red Feather bit the hand of the man holding her and broke free, only to be tackled again. Sparrow shielded the wounded River with her own body, her thin frame trembling but unyielding. Caleb struggled to his feet, tasting blood. Burke was coming for him, his eyes gleaming with murderous intent. "Should have left when you had the chance," Burke said, cracking his knuckles. "Now I'm gonna enjoy this." He swung. Caleb ducked, drove his fist into Burke's stomach. The big man barely flinched. He grabbed Caleb by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "Stupid," Burke hissed. "So damn stupid. All this for a bunch of savages who ain't worth the bullets we're wasting on them." Caleb's vision was going dark. He clawed at Burke's hands, but the grip was like iron. Then Star screamed something in Apache, a word that sounded like a curse and a prayer combined, and drove a knife into Burke's side. Burke roared and dropped Caleb, spinning to face Star. Blood poured from the wound, but he was still standing. Still dangerous. "You little—" Star stabbed at him again, but Burke caught her wrist and twisted. The knife fell. She cried out in pain. "I'm gonna kill you slow," Burke snarled. "I'm gonna make your cowboy watch while I—" The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Burke's eyes went wide. He looked down at the hole in his chest, then back up at Caleb, who stood behind him with a smoking pistol in his hand. "You talk too much," Caleb said. Burke fell. He didn't get back up. For a moment, the fighting stopped. Burke's men stared at their fallen leader, shock written across their faces. "Anyone else?" Caleb's voice was cold as winter. He swept the pistol across the room. "Anyone else want to die for Silas Hartwell?" One by one, the remaining men dropped their weapons and raised their hands. "Smart choice," Dawn Walker said, blood dripping from a cut on her forehead. She gathered up the discarded guns while Painted Sky bound the prisoner's hands. Caleb turned to Star. "Are you hurt?" "My wrist." She cradled it against her chest. "I think it might be broken, but I will live." "River." "The bullet went clean through," Willow reported. "She will recover." Caleb nodded, but his mind was already moving to the next threat. Burke was dead. His men were captured, but Hartwell was still out there. As if summoned by his thoughts, Hartwell's voice rang out from outside. "Impressive, Mr. Thornton. Truly impressive. But you can't stay in there forever, and I have more men coming. Many more." Caleb moved to the window and looked out. Hartwell stood beside his carriage, flanked by a handful of remaining gunmen. More riders were visible in the distance, approaching fast. "He's right," Star said quietly, joining him at the window. We won this battle, but the war is not over. No. Caleb's jaw tightened. It's not. So what do we do? Caleb looked at her, then at the women around the room, battered, bleeding, but unbroken. He thought about his wife, his daughter, all the people he had failed to save. Not this time, he told himself. Not these people. We end it, he said. Right here, right now. He walked to the door and stepped outside. The sunlight was blinding after the darkness of the cabin. Caleb squinted his pistol at his side as Hartwell watched him approach with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Come to surrender, Hartwell asked. Come to give you a choice. Caleb stopped about 20 feet from the carriage. Your enforcer is dead. Most of your men are tied up inside. The evidence of your crimes is already on its way to the federal marshal in Tucson. In a few days, maybe a week, this whole territory is going to know who you really are. Hartwell's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty. You're bluffing. Am I? Caleb shook his head slowly. The treaty, the forged documents, the bribes you paid to judges and officials. We have copies of everything, Hartwell, multiple copies sent by different routes. Even if you kill us all right now, the truth is already out there. You can't stop it. I can try. You can. But think about what that means. Caleb gestured toward the cabin where the Apache women were now emerging, weapons in hand, forming a line behind him. You'll have to kill everyone here. Then you'll have to find the copies we sent. Then you'll have to explain to the federal government why a Union veteran and 7 Apache women were murdered on land you claim is legally yours. He paused. How long do you think it'll take before someone starts asking questions you can't answer? Hartwell was silent. The riders he had called were getting closer, but he held up a hand to stop them. What do you want? He finally asked. Justice. Star stepped forward, her broken wrist held against her chest, but her voice strong. We want our land back. Every acre you stole. We want the charges against us dropped. We want the truth published in every newspaper in the territory. And we want you to leave Copper Valley and never return. Hartwell laughed. Actually laughed, his head thrown back. You must be joking. After everything I've built here, you expect me to just walk away. I expect you to survive, Caleb said. Which you won't if you stay. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you the truth. The same truth that's about to be told to everyone in Arizona. Caleb's voice hardened. You can ride out of here today with your life and whatever money you've already stolen. Or you can stay and fight and lose everything, including your neck when the federal marshals come calling. The silence stretched out like a held breath. Hartwell looked at the women lined up behind Caleb, at the bodies of his men scattered across the yard, at the blood soaking into the dirt of a ranch that should have been easy to claim. And for the first time since Caleb had met him, something cracked in that polished facade. This isn't over, Hartwell said quietly. For you it is. Caleb raised his pistol and aimed it directly at Hartwell's heart. Now get on your horse and ride. And if I ever see your face in this valley again, I won't bother talking first. Hartwell held his gaze for a long, charged moment. Then slowly he turned and climbed back into his carriage. Move out, he ordered his driver. All of you, we're leaving. The remaining gunmen exchanged confused glances, but nobody argued. One by one they mounted their horses and followed the carriage as it rolled away, leaving behind the dead and wounded. Caleb didn't lower his pistol until the last rider had disappeared over the ridge. Then his legs gave out. He dropped to his knees in the dirt, his whole body shaking. The adrenaline that had kept him going through the battle drained away, leaving nothing but exhaustion and pain. Star was beside him in an instant, her good arm wrapped around his shoulders. It's over, she said softly. It's over. No. Caleb shook his head. He'll come back, or send someone else. Men like Hartwell never stop until the law stops them. Star helped him to his feet. Your marshal. The evidence. It will work. I have to believe it will work." Caleb looked at her, at the hope in her eyes that had somehow survived everything she had been through. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you keep believing when everything keeps falling apart?" Star was quiet for a moment. Then she reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his bruised cheek. "Because my grandmother told me a story once," she said, "about a stranger with grief in his heart who would come in our darkest hour, a man who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And she said that when he came, he would not just save us, we would save each other." Caleb felt something shift inside him, something that had been frozen for 2 years, buried under guilt and grief and the endless weight of loss. "Star, shh." She pressed a finger to his lips. "Not now. Now we rest. We heal. We wait for your Marshal and pray the truth reaches him in time." And then, a faint smile crossed her face. "And then, we see what the future holds." Behind them, the other women had gathered. Dawn Walker was helping Sparrow tend to the wounded. Red Feather stood apart, staring at the horizon, with tears streaming down her face. "My son," she said quietly. "When this is over, I am going to find my son." "We'll help you," Willow promised. "We'll find him together." "Together." Red Feather's voice cracked. "I never thought I would hear that word again." Painted Sky put an arm around her shoulders. "We survived the rope, sister. We survived the fire. We will survive this too." Caleb watched them. These 7 women who had been sentenced to die and refused to surrender, who had fought beside him like warriors, who had shown him that even in the darkest times there was still something worth fighting for. "Thank you," he said quietly. Star looked up at him. "For what?" "For giving me a reason to live again." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Instead, she leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder, her body warm against his. "Thank you for cutting the ropes," she whispered. "Thank you for not looking away." They stood there together as the sun climbed higher in the sky, bathing the blood-soaked ranch in golden light. The battle was over. The war might still be coming. But for this one moment, this one precious heartbeat of time, they were alive. And that was enough. In the days that followed, they buried the dead and tended the wounded. Caleb repaired what he could of the damaged cabin, while the women established a more permanent camp on his land. The prisoners they had captured were tied up in the barn, guarded in shifts, waiting to be turned over to whatever law would come. Word spread quickly through the territory. The Battle of Thornton Ranch people were calling it. The day a lone rancher and 7 Apache women stood against Silas Hartwell and won. Some called Caleb a hero, others called him a fool. But everyone agreed on one thing: nothing in Copper Valley would ever be the same. On the 5th day, a rider appeared on the horizon. Caleb grabbed his rifle, but Star put a hand on his arm. "Wait," she said. "Look at the horse, the uniform." He squinted against the sun. The rider was wearing the blue coat of a federal marshal. "Marshal Davidson," Caleb breathed. "He came." The rider reached the ranch and dismounted. He was older than Caleb remembered, gray at the temples, lines around his eyes, but the sharp intelligence in his gaze was unchanged. "Captain Thornton," Davidson said, extending his hand. "It's been a long time." "Too long." Caleb gripped his hand firmly. "You got my letter." "I got 3 of them, actually, all telling the same story." Davidson's expression was grim. "A story I intend to investigate very thoroughly." Star stepped forward. "Marshal, I am Morning Star. These are my sisters. We are the ones who were hanged." Davidson studied her for a long moment, then nodded respectfully. "Ma'am, I've read the documents you sent. If half of what's in them is true, Silas Hartwell is going to spend the rest of his life in a federal prison." He paused. "And I intend to make sure every word is verified." "The prisoners in the barn can testify," Caleb said. They'll talk to save their own skins. I'm counting on it." Davidson looked around at the damaged ranch, the bloodstains still visible in the dirt, the weary faces of the survivors. "You've been through hell, all of you. But I promise you this justice will be done. Whatever it takes." Star's eyes filled with tears she had been holding back for days. "That is all we ever wanted," she said quietly. "Justice. And the chance to live in peace on the land our ancestors died for." Davidson nodded. "Then let's make sure that happens." As the marshal began his investigation, questioning prisoners and examining documents, Caleb walked to the edge of his property and looked out at the mountains. Star followed him. "You are thinking about leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I came here to disappear, to find a place where no one knew me and I could just fade away." And now, he turned to face her. In the afternoon light, with the wind stirring her long black hair, she had never looked more beautiful. "Now I'm thinking maybe I was looking for the wrong thing," he said slowly. "Maybe it wasn't about disappearing. Maybe it was about finding something worth staying for." Star stepped closer. "And have you found something worth staying for?" Caleb reached out and took her hand. Her fingers intertwined with his, warm and strong. "I think I have," he said quietly. "If she'll have me." Star smiled. A real smile, full and bright, the first he had ever seen from her. "She will think about it," she said. "After the justice is done, after her sisters are safe, after her people have their land back. And then," she squeezed his hand, "and then we will see what the future holds. Together." Caleb smiled back. For the first time in 2 years, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. The ghosts that had followed him across 1,000 miles seemed quieter. Somehow their voices fading into the wind. He had come to this land looking for an ending. Instead, he had found a beginning. The weeks that followed were the longest of Caleb Thornton's life. Marshal Davidson worked with the precision of a man who had spent decades untangling lies. He interviewed every prisoner in the barn, recorded their testimonies, and sent riders to Tucson with requests for additional federal support. He examined every document Star and her sisters had gathered, cross-referencing dates and signatures until a clear picture emerged. Silas Hartwell had built his empire on forgery, bribery, and blood. 23 families, Davidson said one evening, sitting at Caleb's kitchen table with papers spread before him. 23 families driven off their land through fraudulent claims. 6 men killed resisting eviction, and that's just what we can prove so far. "What about the treaty?" Star asked. She sat beside Caleb, her wrist now splinted and healing. "The agreement my father signed with the government." Davidson nodded slowly. "The treaty is legitimate. I've confirmed it with records in Washington. The land known as Copper Valley was granted to your people in perpetuity. Hartwell's claims are worthless." He paused. "Which means everything he built here, the mines, the railroad contracts, the town itself, was built on stolen ground." Star closed her eyes. For a moment, Caleb thought she might cry. But when she opened them again, they were clear and steady. "My father died defending that treaty," she said quietly. "He always believed the truth would come out. He just did not live to see it." "He sees it now," Willow said softly from her place by the fire. "His spirit watches over us, over all of us." Davidson gathered his papers and stood. "I'm heading to Tucson tomorrow to file the formal charges. Hartwell has fled the territory, but we'll find him. Men like him always think they can run far enough to escape justice." His jaw tightened. "They're always wrong." "How long?" Caleb asked. "Before this is settled." "Weeks, maybe months. The courts move slowly, especially when powerful men are involved." Davidson looked at Star. "But I give you my word, ma'am. Your land will be returned. Your people will have justice. Whatever it takes." After the marshal left, silence settled over the cabin. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the wind whispered across the empty land. "Do you believe him?" River asked. She was sitting in the corner, her wounded shoulder still bandaged. "Do you really think they will give us our land back?" "I believe he will try," Star said. "Whether he succeeds." She shook her head. "We have learned not to trust promises from men in uniforms." "This one's different," Caleb said firmly. "I served with Davidson during the war. He's not like the others. When he gives his word, he keeps it. You trust him with your life. I trust him with yours, and that means more." Star looked at him. Something passed between them, something that had been growing stronger every day since the battle. Something neither of them had put into words yet. "Then we wait," she said finally. "And we hope." The waiting was harder than Caleb expected. Days blurred into weeks. The prisoners were taken to Tucson to await trial. The bodies of the fallen were buried in unmarked graves on the edge of the property. And slowly, tentatively, life began to return to normal, or what passed for normal now. The women established a routine. Dawn Walker took charge of security, patrolling the property boundaries and training the others in defensive tactics. Willow set up a proper healing lodge in the barn, using herbs and medicines she gathered from the hills. Sparrow taught the younger women the old songs, the old stories, the traditions their people had kept alive for generations. And Red Feather waited. Every day she walked to the ridge overlooking the eastern road and stood there for hours watching for riders who never came. Every night she cried herself to sleep, murmuring her son's name like a prayer. "Tommy, Tommy, Mama's coming." Caleb found her there one morning, standing in the cold wind, with her arms wrapped around herself. "You'll freeze to death," he said, draping his coat over her shoulders. "I do not care." Her voice was hollow. "What is the point of surviving if I cannot hold my son again? We'll find him. I promised you that." "Promises." She laughed bitterly. "Everyone makes promises. My husband promised he would come back from hunting. My mother promised the soldiers would not hurt us. My father promised our land would always be ours." She turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Promises mean nothing. Words mean nothing. The only thing that matters is what we do." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. "So let's do something. Tell me where your son was hidden. Who has him? Everything you know." Red Feather's eyes widened. "You would help me find him even now with everything else?" "Nothing else matters more." Caleb put his hands on her shoulders. "You fought beside me, bled beside me, nearly died beside me. That makes you family, and family doesn't leave family behind." Red Feather broke down. She collapsed against his chest, sobbing, and Caleb held her the way he used to hold his daughter when she was scared, the way he wished he could have held her at the end. "The Henderson farm," Red Feather managed between sobs. 20 miles east. Sarah Henderson was my mother's friend. She took Tommy when the soldiers came. She promised to keep him safe until—" Her voice caught. "Until I came back for him." "Then that's where we're going." Caleb released her and stepped back. "Get your things. We leave within the hour." Star's voice came from behind them. She was standing at the edge of the ridge watching. "I'm coming too," she said. "We all are." Caleb shook his head. "Someone needs to stay and protect the ranch. If Hartwell's men come back, Dawn Walker and Painted Sky can handle any threat, and Willow needs to stay with River until her wound heals fully." Star walked forward and took Red Feather's hand. "But the rest of us are going. A mother should not have to face this moment alone." Red Feather's grip tightened on Star's fingers. "Sister, we survived the ropes together. We will bring your son home together." Caleb looked at the two women, at the bond between them that went deeper than blood. And he realized, not for the first time, that he was witnessing something rare, something beautiful. "All right," he said. "We ride together." The Henderson farm was small and weathered, nestled in a valley between two rocky hills. A thin column of smoke rose from the chimney, and chickens scratched in the yard. It looked peaceful. Normal. Nothing like the kind of place where secrets were hidden. Caleb, Star, Red, Feather, and Sparrow approached slowly, their horses picking careful paths through the rocky terrain. "Wait here," Caleb said, dismounting. "Let me go first. Make sure it's safe." "No." Red Feather slid from her horse before he could stop her. "That is my son in there. I will not wait another moment." She walked toward the farmhouse, her steps quickening with each stride. Caleb hurried to catch up, his hand resting on his pistol. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the doorway, middle-aged with graying hair and kind eyes that widened when she saw Red Feather. "Oh my God," Sarah Henderson whispered. "Oh my God. They told us you were dead. They said, 'Where is he?'" Red Feather's voice shook. "Where is my son?" Sarah turned and called into the house. "Tommy! Tommy, come here. There's someone you need to see." Footsteps, small hesitant footsteps. And then a boy appeared in the doorway. 4 years old, with his mother's dark eyes and his father's strong chin. He looked at Red Feather with confusion, at first not recognizing the woman who had been torn from him weeks ago. Then recognition dawned. "Mama." Red Feather fell to her knees, her arms open wide. "Tommy, oh Tommy, my baby." The boy ran to her. He crashed into her embrace with the force of a small hurricane, and Red Feather held him so tight Caleb thought she might never let go. "Mama." Tommy was crying now, his small body shaking. "Mama, I thought you were gone. I thought—" "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Red Feather was sobbing too, rocking him back and forth. "I'm never leaving you again. Never. I promise. I promise." Caleb stepped back, giving them space. Star appeared beside him, tears streaming down her face. "This is why we fight," she said quietly. "This moment. This is why." He took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Yeah, this is why." Sarah Henderson watched the reunion with tears of her own. "I did everything I could," she told Caleb. "Kept him hidden when Hartwell's men came asking questions. Told them I didn't know anything about any Apache child. You risked your life for him. He's a child, an innocent child." Sarah's jaw tightened. "I don't care what anyone says about his people. No child deserves to grow up without his mother." "No," Caleb agreed. "They don't." They stayed at the Henderson farm for 2 days. Sarah fed them, sheltered them, and shared what news she had heard from town. Hartwell had indeed fled the territory, taking most of his wealth with him. But his empire was crumbling. The workers at the copper mine had walked off the job when they learned the truth. The railroad company had suspended construction pending investigation, and the people of Copper Valley were finally tentatively beginning to speak the truth about what they had witnessed. "Fear kept them silent," Sarah said. "But shame is stronger than fear. Nobody wants to be remembered as the person who stood by while innocent women were hanged." "Some did more than stand by," Star said quietly. "Some helped. And they'll answer for it. The marshal has been taking statements. Arrests are coming." Sarah looked at the women gathered in her kitchen. "You started something bigger than you know. Something that's going to change this whole territory." On the morning of the 3rd day they prepared to leave. Tommy clung to his mother's hand, his small face solemn with the weight of understanding beyond his years. He had lost his father to violence. He had nearly lost his mother. But now she was here alive and holding him, and nothing else mattered. "Will we have a home again, Mama?" he asked, as Red Feather lifted him onto her horse. "Yes, baby. We're going to our home now, a place where we'll be safe. A place where nobody will ever hurt us again. Promise." Red Feather looked at Caleb, at Star, at Sparrow, at the family they had forged through fire and blood. "Promise," she said. The ride back to the ranch was quiet but peaceful. Tommy fell asleep against his mother's chest, exhausted from the emotional reunion. Sparrow hummed an old lullaby that Caleb didn't recognize, but found strangely comforting. And Star rode beside him close enough that their knees occasionally touched. "You did a good thing," she said softly, helping her find him. "It was the right thing?" "Not everyone does the right thing. You could have said it was too dangerous, that we needed to wait for the marshal, that there were more important things to focus on." "Nothing's more important than this." Caleb nodded toward Red Feather and Tommy. "That's what it's all about. Family, love, having something worth fighting for." Star was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and took his hand. "Caleb Thornton," she said, "you are not the man I expected when I first opened my eyes and saw you cutting me down. Who did you expect? Someone who wanted something? Everyone wants something. Land, power, women." She squeezed his hand. "But you just wanted to help. You just wanted to do what was right. I did not know men like you still existed. I'm not special. I just got tired of being the kind of man who looks the other way. That is what makes you special." She pulled her horse closer to his. "Where I come from, we have a word for someone like you, someone who enters your life unexpectedly and changes everything." "What word?" She smiled. "I will teach you, someday." They reached the ranch as the sun was setting. Dawn Walker met them at the gate, her expression guarded until she saw Tommy in Red Feather's arms. Then her scarred face softened into something that might have been a smile. "You found him." "We found him." Red Feather dismounted carefully, still holding her son. "Thank you for keeping our home safe while we were gone. It's what family does." That night they gathered around the fire in the cabin, all of them together for the first time since the battle. Red Feather held Tommy in her lap, while Sparrow told stories of their ancestors. Willow prepared a healing tea for River, whose shoulder was finally beginning to mend. Dawn Walker sat by the door, her pistol within reach, but her eyes relaxed. And Painted Sky played a wooden flute, filling the air with music that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. Caleb sat in the corner, watching them all. These women who had been strangers just weeks ago, who had nearly died on posts meant to serve as warnings, who had fought beside him and bled beside him and taught him what it meant to truly live again. Star appeared beside him and sat down, her shoulder brushing against his. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking I never expected this. This. A family." He gestured at the room. "People I care about. A reason to wake up in the morning." He turned to look at her. "You." Star's breath caught. "Caleb? I know we haven't known each other long. I know there's still so much to deal with, the trial, the land, whatever comes next. But I need you to know." He took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I need you to know that whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere. This is where I belong now. With you. With all of you." Star's eyes glistened. She lifted her free hand and touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines of worry and grief that had marked him for so long. "My grandmother's prophecy," she said softly. "A stranger with grief in his heart, who would come in our darkest hour. A man who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear." She leaned closer. "She was right about you, about all of it." "Star?" But she was wrong about one thing. Star's lips curved into a gentle smile. "She said you would save us. But that is not what happened." "What happened?" "We saved each other." She kissed him, soft and gentle, like the first rain after a long drought, and Caleb felt something inside him break open, all the grief and guilt and loneliness he had carried for 2 years, finally releasing its grip. When they parted, the room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching them with expressions ranging from knowing smiles to outright grins. "Finally," Dawn Walker said dryly. I was starting to think you two would never figure it out." "Mind your own business," Star said, but she was smiling. "Your business is our business, sister. That's what family means." The laughter that followed was warm and genuine, the kind of laughter that comes from people who have survived hell together and found joy on the other side. 3 weeks later, the letter arrived from Tucson. Caleb read it aloud to the assembled group, his voice growing stronger with each sentence. Silas Hartwell was apprehended in California, attempting to board a ship to Mexico. He has been returned to Arizona territory to stand trial for fraud, conspiracy, and murder. The federal court has ruled that all land claims made by Frontier Land and Trust Company are null and void. The Treaty of 1851, granting Copper Valley to the Apache people, has been reinstated in full. He looked up at Star, whose eyes were streaming with tears. "It worked," he said. "We won." Star took the letter from his hands and read it again as if afraid the words would disappear. Then she turned to her sisters, to Willow and River, to Dawn Walker, and Painted Sky, to Red Feather, holding Tommy to Sparrow with her gentle smile. "Our land," she whispered. "Our home. We have it back." The cabin erupted in celebration. Sparrow began singing a victory song that the others quickly joined. Dawn Walker embraced Painted Sky, both of them crying openly for the first time since Caleb had known them. River and Red Feather danced with Tommy between them, the boy laughing with delight at the joy surrounding him. And Star walked to Caleb and wrapped her arms around him, holding on tight. "Thank you," she said against his chest. "Thank you for believing in us, for fighting with us, for not giving up." "I couldn't give up." Caleb held her close. "I had too much to live for. And now, what do we live for now?" He pulled back to look at her face. This woman who had taught him how to hope again, who had shown him that even the deepest grief could give way to something beautiful. "Now we build," he said. "Together. We rebuild your village. We make this valley what it was always meant to be. And we make sure that no one ever forgets what happened here, the evil that was done, and the courage that defeated it." Star nodded slowly. "The children will know, and their children, and all the generations that come after. Yes, they'll know that 7 women refused to die, that they stood up against an empire and won." He cupped her face in his hands. "And they'll know about the love that grew from all that pain, the family that formed from all that loss. Is that what we are? A family?" Caleb looked around the cabin at the celebrating women, at the joy and the tears and the healing that filled every corner. "Yeah," he said softly. "That's exactly what we are." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Caleb and Star traveled to Tucson to testify along with Malcolm Reed, who had finally found the courage to tell the truth about what he had witnessed. One by one, the victims of Hartwell's crimes came forward: settlers who had been driven from their land, workers who had been exploited, officials who had been blackmailed into silence. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the bribes, the order to hang 7 innocent women without trial. Silas Hartwell sat in the defendant's chair, his silver hair now disheveled, his cold eyes finally showing fear. He had spent his whole life believing that wealth and power made him untouchable. Now he was learning the truth that men like him always learn too late. No one is above justice. Not forever. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. Life imprisonment with no possibility of pardon. When the judge pronounced sentence, Star gripped Caleb's hand so hard he thought she might break his fingers. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." "No," Caleb said, pulling her into his arms. "It's just beginning." They returned to Copper Valley as heroes. Word had spread throughout the territory. The story of the 7 ropes, they were calling it. The tale of 7 Apache women who were sentenced to die and refused to give up. Who fought back against impossible odds and won. People lined the roads as they rode through town. Some threw flowers. Others waved handkerchiefs. and Malcolm Reed stood on the steps of the Arizona Chronicle office, holding up the latest edition of his newspaper. "Justice served," the headline read. "Hartwell guilty treaty reinstated." "You did this," Caleb said to Star as they passed. "You and your sisters. You changed everything." "We did this," she corrected. "All of us together." The ranch looked different when they finally arrived home. Dawnwalker and Painted Sky had been busy. New fences stood around the property, and the damaged cabin had been repaired. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the smell of cooking meat filled the air. "Welcome home," Willow said, meeting them at the gate. "We've been preparing." "Preparing for what?" Willow smiled. "For what comes next." What came next was more than Caleb could have imagined. Over the following months, the Apache village rose again on the slopes of Copper Valley. Families who had been scattered returned to their ancestral land. Children played in streams where their grandparents had played, and the sounds of laughter and song filled the air once more. Caleb worked alongside them, building houses and barns and fences. He learned their language, their customs, their stories, and slowly, gradually, he became one of them, not by blood, but by choice, by love. "You have earned a new name," Sparrow told him one evening as they sat around the fire. "A name from our people." "What name?" The old woman smiled. "Rope Cutter, the one who gave us back our lives." Caleb felt tears prick his eyes. "I don't deserve—" "You do." Star moved to sit beside him, taking his hand. "You deserve this, and more. You deserve a home, a family, a future." "I have all of that," he said. "I have you." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "And I have you, always." Red Feather approached with Tommy in her arms. The boy had grown in the months since his rescue, his face filling out, his smile coming easier. He looked at Caleb with the trust of a child who had learned that not all men brought pain. "Uncle Caleb," Tommy said, "Mama says you saved her, that you saved everyone." "Your mama saved herself. I just helped a little." "That's not what she says." Tommy squirmed free of his mother's arms and ran to Caleb, climbing into his lap. "She says you're a hero, like in the old stories." Caleb held the boy close, feeling the warmth of him, the life of him. Remembering another child, he had held another life he couldn't save. But this time was different. This time, everyone lived. "I'm not a hero," he said softly. "I'm just a man who got tired of running." "From what?" Caleb looked at Star, at Red Feather, at all the faces gathered around the fire faces that had become his family. "From love," he said. "I was running from love, because I was afraid to lose it again." "And now?" Star asked. Caleb smiled. "Now I'm not running anymore." The first snow of winter came early that year. Caleb stood on the porch of the cabin he had rebuilt with his own hands, watching the white flakes drift down across Copper Valley. The land stretched out before him, no longer barren and empty, but alive with homes and gardens, and the smoke of cooking fires rising into the gray sky. It had been 1 year since he rode into this valley looking for a place to die, and found instead a reason to live. "You're thinking too hard again." Star appeared beside him, wrapped in a thick blanket, her breath misting in the cold air. She had grown even more beautiful over the past months, her face softer now, the sharp edges of survival giving way to something gentler, happier. "Just remembering," Caleb said. "This time last year I didn't think I'd still be alive." "Neither did I." She slipped her hand into his. "I was hanging from a rope waiting to die. And then a stranger came and cut me down. Best decision I ever made." "Was it?" She tilted her head, studying him with those dark eyes that still made his heart race. "No regrets. You could have had a quiet life, a peaceful life. Instead you got a family," he finished. "A home. A woman I love more than anything in this world." He turned to face her fully. I'd make the same choice 1,000 times. Star smiled, that smile that had become his favorite sight in the world. Good, because I have something to tell you. What? She took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. Caleb's breath caught. He stared at her, not daring to believe, not daring to hope. Star, are you? Willow confirmed it this morning. Her eyes glistened with tears. We're going to have a baby, Caleb. You're going to be a father again. The world stopped. For a long, frozen moment, Caleb couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there with his hand on her belly and feel the impossible weight of joy crushing his chest. Then the tears came. He pulled Star into his arms and held her tight, sobbing against her shoulder, with a grief and happiness so tangled together he couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I thought, his voice broke. After Lily, I thought I would never. I know. Star stroked his hair. I know, my love, but life has a way of giving us second chances, even when we don't think we deserve them. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. Let me decide what you deserve. She pulled back to look at him, her hands cupping his face. You are a good man, Caleb Thornton. You saved my life. You saved my sister's. You helped us reclaim our home and our future. She kissed him softly. You deserve all the happiness the world can give you. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons he was unworthy of this gift. But looking into her eyes, seeing the love there he found, he couldn't speak at all. So he just held her, and let the tears fall, and felt something inside him finally completely heal. The news spread quickly through the village. By evening, everyone had gathered at Caleb and Star's cabin to celebrate. Sparrow led the women in songs of blessing. Willow prepared special teas that she said would keep the baby strong. Dawn Walker, who rarely smiled, actually laughed out loud when Tommy ran around telling everyone he was going to have a cousin. Not a cousin, Red Feather corrected gently. A brother or sister. We are all family here. All family, Tommy repeated seriously. Uncle Caleb's baby will be my family too. That's right. Red Feather pulled her son close, her eyes meeting Caleb's across the room. We're all family now. Forever. Later that night, after the celebrations had quieted and the guests had gone home, Caleb sat by the fire with Star curled against his side. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, and outside the wind whispered through the valley like a gentle song. I want to marry you, Caleb said quietly. Star looked up at him. Is that a question? No. He smiled. It's a statement. I want to marry you, Star. I want to stand before your people and my people and God himself and declare that I belong to you, that I will love you and protect you and stay by your side until the day I die. That sounds like a vow. It is. Star was quiet for a long moment. Then she sat up and turned to face him, her expression serious. Among my people, marriage is not just between two individuals. It is a union of families, of histories, of futures. She took his hands in hers. When you marry me, you marry all of us, the living and the dead, the past and the future. Are you ready for that? I've been ready since the day I cut you down from that rope. Then yes. Her face broke into a radiant smile. Yes, Caleb Thornton, I will marry you. He kissed her then long and deep, pouring into it all the love and gratitude and joy that words couldn't express. And when they finally parted, both of them breathless, he knew that this was the moment his old life truly ended and his new one began. The wedding took place on the first day of spring. The whole valley gathered for the ceremony, not just the Apache families who had returned to their ancestral land, but settlers from miles around. Malcolm Reed came from town with his wife and daughters. Sarah Henderson brought flowers from her garden. Even Marshall Davidson made the journey from Tucson, standing in the back with a rare smile on his weathered face. Caleb stood beneath the old oak tree where Star and her sisters had once been, sentenced to die. The same tree, but transformed, now decorated with ribbons and flowers, surrounded by the people who had fought and bled and triumphed together. Death had marked this place once. Today, it would be consecrated to life. Star walked toward him through the crowd, and Caleb's heart stopped. She wore a dress of white doeskin, decorated with beadwork that Sparrow had spent months creating. Her long black hair flowed loose over her shoulders, woven through with wildflowers. And her eyes, those dark eyes that had haunted his dreams since the moment he first saw them, shone with a light that seemed to come from somewhere beyond this world. "You're beautiful," he whispered as she reached him. "You're crying," she whispered back. "I can't help it." Sparrow stepped forward to perform the ceremony, speaking first in Apache and then in English so all could understand. She spoke of love that transcends boundaries, of courage that defeats evil, of two wounded souls who found healing in each other's arms. "The Creator has brought you together," Sparrow said, her aged voice carrying across the silent crowd. "Not by accident, but by design. You were meant to find each other. You were meant to save each other. And now you are meant to build a future together for yourselves, for your children, and for all the generations that will come after." She turned to Caleb. "Rope cutter, do you take this woman as your wife? Will you love her, honor her, and protect her all the days of your life?" "I will." Caleb's voice was steady despite the tears on his cheeks. "I do." Sparrow turned to Star. "Morning. Star, do you take this man as your husband? Will you love him, honor him, and stand beside him all the days of your life?" "I will." Star's voice rang clear and strong. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by our ancestors and our Creator, I declare you husband and wife." Sparrow smiled, her old eyes twinkling. "You may kiss your bride." Caleb took Star in his arms and kissed her while the crowd erupted in cheers. Somewhere Tommy was shouting with delight. Somewhere Dawn Walker was trying unsuccessfully to hide her tears. And somewhere Caleb was sure the spirits of all those who had been lost were watching and smiling. When he finally released Star, she was laughing through her tears. "Hello, husband," she said. "Hello, wife." He cupped her face in his hands. "I love you. I love you more than words can say." "Then don't say it. Show me. Every day for the rest of our lives." "I will. I promise." The celebration lasted 3 days. There was feasting and dancing and storytelling. The Apache women performed traditional ceremonies, while the settler families shared their own customs. For those 3 days, there were no divisions, no boundaries, no difference between red and white. There was only community, only family, only love. On the third night, Caleb found himself standing alone at the edge of the celebration, looking out at the valley that had become his home. So much had changed in a year. So much had been lost. So much had been found. "You're thinking again." He turned to find Dawn Walker standing behind him. The scar on her face caught the firelight, but her eyes were soft in a way he had rarely seen. "Just grateful," he said. "Grateful to be here, to be alive, to be part of something bigger than myself." Dawn Walker nodded slowly. "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For not being afraid." She stepped closer. "When you found us hanging from those posts, most men would have ridden away, would have told themselves it wasn't their problem. But you didn't. You climbed up and cut those ropes like it was the most natural thing in the world." "It was," Caleb said simply. "I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd done anything else." "That's what makes you different." Dawn Walker's voice was rough with emotion. "That's why we trust you. Why we follow you. Why Star loves you." She paused. "You're a good man, Caleb Thornton. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." She turned and walked back toward the celebration, leaving Caleb alone with his thoughts. But not for long. Star appeared beside him, her hand finding his in the darkness. "What are you doing out here?" "Counting my blessings." "That could take a while." "I've got time." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I've got all the time in the world now." They stood together in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. The same stars that had watched over this valley for centuries. The same stars that would watch over their children and their children's children. "I want to tell you something," Star said quietly. "Something I've never told anyone." "What is it?" "The night before they hanged us, I prayed. I prayed to my grandmother's spirit, to our ancestors, to anyone who might be listening." Her voice trembled. "I asked them to send someone to save us. I didn't really believe anyone would come. I thought it was just the desperate hope of a dying woman. But I prayed anyway. And then I came. And then you came." She turned in his arms to face him. "You were the answer to my prayer, Caleb. You were the miracle I asked for." "I'm no miracle. You are to me." She touched his face. "You are to all of us." The baby came in the heat of summer. Star labored for 16 hours while Caleb paced outside the cabin, wearing a track in the dirt. Willow and Sparrow attended her, their calm voices occasionally punctuated by Star's cries of pain. Red Feather sat with Caleb, holding his hand, telling him everything would be fine. But he couldn't stop thinking about Margaret, about Lily, about all the ways he had failed to protect the people he loved. "She's strong," Red Feather said, as if reading his thoughts. "The strongest woman I know. She survived the ropes. She survived Hartwell. She will survive this." "I know." Caleb's voice was hoarse. "I know she's strong. But I can't." He broke off, unable to finish. "You can't stop being afraid. I understand." Red Feather squeezed his hand. "That's what love is. Fear dressed up in beautiful clothes." Before Caleb could respond, a baby's cry pierced the air. He was on his feet and through the door before anyone could stop him. Star lay on the bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up at Caleb with tears streaming down her face. "It's a boy," she whispered. "We have a son." Caleb crossed the room in 3 strides and fell to his knees beside the bed. He looked at the baby, at his son, and felt his heart crack open. The boy had Star's dark hair and coloring, but there was something around his eyes, something in the shape of his chin that was purely Caleb. "He's perfect," Caleb breathed. "He's absolutely perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" With trembling hands, Caleb took his son from Star's arms. The baby was so small, so fragile, so impossibly alive. He stared up at Caleb with unfocused eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. "Hello, little one," Caleb whispered. "I'm your father, and I promise you, I promise with everything I am, that I will never let anything hurt you. I will protect you and your mother with my last breath. I will teach you to be brave and kind and strong, and I will love you every single day for the rest of my life." The baby yawned, tiny and perfect, and Caleb laughed through his tears. "What should we name him?" Star asked. Caleb thought for a long moment. He thought about the past year, about everything they had survived, about the future stretching out before them full of possibility and hope. "What about Joseph?" he said finally. "Joseph Morningstar Thornton, after my father and your grandmother." Star's eyes widened. "You would honor my grandmother's name. She sent me to you. She saved all of us with her prophecy." Caleb looked down at his son. "It seems only right that her name lives on." Star reached up and touched his face. "Joseph Morningstar Thornton. It's perfect. Like him. Like you." Caleb leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Like everything about this life, I never expected to have." The years that followed were the best of Caleb's life. He watched his son take his first steps on the same land where 7 women had once been sentenced to die. He taught Joseph to ride, to shoot, to respect the earth and all living things. He built a life alongside Star that was richer and fuller than anything he had ever imagined. The village continued to grow. Families returned. Children were born. The old songs were sung, and the old stories were told, passed down from generation to generation, so they would never be forgotten. And every year, on the anniversary of the day, Caleb had found them hanging from those posts. The whole community gathered at the old oak tree to remember. We survived. Star would say, speaking the same words every year. We were sentenced to die, and we survived. Not because we were lucky, not because we were special, but because we refused to give up, because we fought for each other, because we believed that love was stronger than hate, that truth was stronger than lies, that hope was stronger than fear. She would look at Caleb, then her eyes shining with love and gratitude. And because a stranger came to our valley in our darkest hour, a man who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear, a man who saw 7 women dying and chose to save them instead of riding away. The story would be told then, the full story from beginning to end. The hanging, the rescue, the battle, the trial, the victory. And everyone would listen, even those who had heard it 100 times before, because some stories never got old. Some stories needed to be told again and again, so that the truth of them would never be forgotten. When Joseph was 10 years old, Caleb took him to the ridge overlooking the valley and told him the story one more time. "This is where it happened," he said, pointing to the spot where the posts had once stood. "This is where I found your mother and your aunts." Joseph looked up at him with serious eyes. "Were you scared, Papa?" Terrified, Caleb knelt down to his son's level. But sometimes being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Is that why you saved them? That's part of it. Caleb put his hand on his son's shoulder. But mostly I saved them because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. Because I knew that if I rode away and left them to die, I would never be able to look at myself in the mirror again. Mama says you were sent by great-grandmother's spirit. Your mama believes in things I can't explain. Caleb smiled. But I've learned that just because I can't explain something doesn't mean it isn't true. Maybe your great-grandmother did send me. Maybe it was fate or destiny or just dumb luck. All I know is that finding your mother was the best thing that ever happened to me. It saved my life just as much as I saved hers. Joseph was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Papa," he finally asked. "Yes, son. When I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to be brave even when I'm scared. I want to help people even when it's hard. I want to—" His voice cracked, and Caleb pulled him into a hug. "You already are like me," he said. "You're brave and kind and strong. And someday when you're older, you'll find your own battles to fight, your own people to protect, your own love to hold on to." He pulled back and looked into his son's eyes, eyes that held both Star's depth and his own determination. "And when that day comes, I know you'll make me proud." "I promise, Papa. I promise I'll make you proud." "You already do, son. Every single day." That night, Caleb sat on the porch with Star watching the sun set over their valley. Joseph played in the yard with Tommy, now a gangly teenager, and the sounds of their laughter filled the air. "Happy?" Star asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible." "No regrets." Caleb thought about his answer carefully. He thought about Margaret and Lily, about the grief that still lived inside him, quieter now, but never truly gone, about the life he had lost and the life he had found. "I'll always miss them," he said finally. "My first wife, my daughter. They'll always be part of me." He took Star's hand. "But if I hadn't lost them, I never would have come here, never would have found you, never would have had Joseph." He squeezed her hand. "So no regrets, only gratitude." Star smiled and kissed his cheek. "My grandmother was right about you. She was right about a lot of things. She was, but especially about you." Star looked out at the valley, at the village they had built together, at the future they had created from the ashes of the past. She said you would come in our darkest hour, that you would save us, and we would save you, that together we would build something that would last for generations. And have we? Star gestured toward the homes scattered across the valley, toward the children playing and the elders telling stories, toward the life that thrived where death had once reigned. What do you think? Caleb pulled her close and held her as the last light faded from the sky. I think, he said softly, that this is what redemption looks like. This is what second chances are made of. This is what happens when you stop running from your grief and start running toward your future. And what does that future look like? Caleb smiled. It looks like this. Exactly like this. A home. A family. A love that grows stronger every day. He kissed the top of her head. It looks like everything I never knew I needed until I found it. Star tilted her face up to kiss him, and in that kiss was everything: the pain and the joy, the loss and the finding, the end of one story and the beginning of another. When they finally parted, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. I love you, rope cutter, Star whispered. I love you too, morning star. Today and tomorrow and every day after that. She smiled, her eyes bright with tears of joy. Then let's go inside. Our family is waiting. Hand in hand they walked into the cabin where their son was waiting, where their future was waiting, where everything they had fought for and bled for and nearly died for was finally beautifully, completely theirs. And as the door closed behind them, the valley settled into peaceful darkness, watched over by stars that had seen everything: the hanging and the rescue, the battle and the victory, the grief and the healing, the love that had grown from the most unlikely seeds. 7 ropes had been cut on a cold morning 1 year ago. 7 lives had been saved, and from those 7 lives a whole world had been born, a world of hope and justice and love that would endure for generations to come. This was their legacy, their triumph, their gift to the future, and no one would ever take it away again.